We're going to head to the US now, where 34-year-old Zohran Mamdani is likely to become New York City's youngest ever mayor as the campaign trail comes to an end and voting begins. Mamdani is the front-runner in a race against experienced rival, former Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo. He's drawn the attention of Trump, though, who has threatened to withhold federal funding should New York elect, quote, a communist.
The Mamdani thing is it's a disaster waiting to happen. We can't have a communist in charge of a great, supposedly free enterprise, kind of a representative city.
Okay, but will New Yorkers listen or be deterred or encouraged by Trump? I am joined now by US political commentator Danielle McLaughlin, who is in New York. Good morning to you from Auckland, Danielle. Tell us a little bit more about Mamdani. Why is it that Trump is calling him a communist?
Mamdani is one of the wunderkinds of the Democratic Party. He's a 34-year-old immigrant. He describes himself as a democratic socialist. So what we're starting to see not only on the right in the United States, but also on the left, younger, more radical candidates who are coming up with energy as opposed to a ton of experience. But what Mamdani has done, he not only defeated his key rival Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary, so Cuomo has therefore needed to run as an independent. He is looking like he's going to win. He's 34 years old. He's not quite the youngest mayor in the history of New York City. That goes to Hugh Grant from around the 1850s. But saying that 34, he's spent a couple of years in the Senate in New York State, but otherwise he is running on hope. He's been characterized as having the kind of energy of a young Obama, and New Yorkers, quite frankly, for the most part, couldn't care less what Donald Trump thinks, and in some ways would be pleased to hear that Donald Trump is so worried about this.
He is making some big promises, like big expensive promises about rent freezes, free childcare, public transport. How's he going to fund all of that?
So his plan, which will require, of course, the state legislature and the city legislature to get on board with him. He wants to increase taxes for millionaires in New York, which is, of course, people earning over $1 million. Now, those people already pay about 50% in taxes because the city tax is income as well as the state and the federal government. So you've got a lot of unhappy millionaires. He's also saying he's going to increase corporate taxation, which then can, of course, serve as a disincentive for companies to come to New York City. So, this is always the challenge, that the big ideas people have is how you actually get this done, practically speaking. His rival, Andrew Cuomo, has completely lambasted him, saying that these promises are absolutely not achievable and is relying on his own record. It's actually someone who, as governor, did a lot for New York City. He's relying on that record as a pragmatist, but I don't think it's going to be enough for Andrew Cuomo in this race.
I know you've been out and about with the New York Marathon just recently. What is the feeling in New York? Are the polls going to prove accurate? Is there a mood for change?
Mamdani has been leading by about 14% on the average of the polls. That's a pretty insurmountable lead. We've seen about 750,000, especially young voters, coming out early. Tomorrow is technically the day that New York City voters will actually go to the polls. Yes, I ran the New York City Marathon yesterday, and the energy, which is always incredibly eclectic, had all sorts of hilarious signs commentating on the state of the race, funny signs. You run better than the government does, because of course we have this full shutdown on top of what's happening in terms of this the mayoral race, which is capturing the imaginations of New Yorkers.
Actually, on that note, how is this government shutdown still dragging on? But more importantly, what is the impact for those who rely on a government check?
What often happens in these circumstances is that the most vulnerable populations who do rely on government support are the ones that ultimately pay for the shutdown. We are on, as of today, day 34, which is the second longest in history. The last was 35 days, and for sure we're going to blow through this because there can be no vote on the funding bill, the bill that will fund the government, until the middle of this week. The last shutdown, the longest in history, was also under the Trump administration back in 2018 into 2019. And the people who are suffering the most, and one of the real the real points of bitter dissent between Republicans and Democrats are food stamps. So the poorest Americans, about 48 million or 1 in 8 Americans, do rely on government subsidies to buy simple groceries. And right now, it's clear their checks for November are going to be delayed. And that's where the rubber hits the road. This government is shut down, but it's the poorest people who really need government to ensure that they can feed their families. They're the ones who are going to be ultimately paying the price here.